So my own research is dedicated to illegal exploitation of forest resources in the Amazon, and we're here to talk about its impact on climate change and what's the role of law enforcement in the climate crisis. Current legislation governing discrete sources of greenhouse gas emissions are under-enforced, including laws pertaining to deforestation, regulation of mining activities, and use of fossil fuels. Law enforcement and judiciary entities do not use their full power to address the climate crisis. Instead, recent ICT and social developments have made it possible for investigative and activity CCCA seeks to trigger and support global judicial action against illegal activities and related to climate change. To talk about the ideas behind CCCA's work, we're here with Reinhold Gallmetzer. He's the founder and chairperson of the board of the directors of the Center for Climate Crime Analysis, and he's also an appeals counsel for the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Thank you, Reinhold, very much for taking some time off your busy schedule to be here with us today. And also sharing her talks and making comments, we'll have Professor Maria Nusdeo. She's an associate professor at environmental law at the University of São Paulo, and has extensive research and advocacy experience in climate action. Thank you, Professor Ana Maria. Well, this meeting is hosted by the Maria Sibila Mary Center and co-organized by University of São Paulo and Pontifícia Universidade Católica do Paraná Law Graduate Programs. And our meeting is being recorded, and it's available at Mecila's YouTube channel. Even after the event, you can check the record over there. And I would like also to take the opportunity to give my thank you to Professor Samuel Rodrigues Barbosa, who is in the backstage, but he was a key piece on intermediating the connections between us and the Mecilas. And well, without further ado, I'll pass the word to Reinhold. And please, Reinhold, if you want to add some more information about this brief introduction that I made. And well, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bruno. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you. Thanks to Mecila for hosting this. This is a very, very important topic, and you will hear that I will speak about it with a lot of passion and emotion, because I think that addressing environmental destruction, climate change is indeed one of the biggest challenges of our time. Let me just say a few more things about myself, so you have some context. As Bruno said, my name is Reinhold Gallmetzer. I'm originally from a small village in the Italian Alps. During my entire youth, and when I was a young person, I wanted to be a classical musician. But then I realized I just needed a real job. So I became a lawyer. I studied in Austria, in Italy, in Scotland. I became a lawyer, eventually a prosecutor at the International Criminal Court. I've been in this job for the past 14 years, and in this capacity, me and my colleague, we are prosecuting the most serious crimes. These are war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, the crime of aggression committed all over the world. But in spite of the noble calling of my job, many years ago, I came to realize that indeed the biggest challenge of our time is climate change, is the threat posed to us, to our societies, to our civilization by the effects of climate change. I think, crime, migration, hunger, social injustice, all of that will seriously get worse if we are not able, as a society, as societies, to address the threat of climate change. Or as the Pentagon calls it, climate change is a risk accelerator for all of the threats that I've mentioned before. And it is also a fact that we're only able to address climate change through an unprecedented, coordinated and expedited action that involves all aspects of our societies: the economy, financial systems, technology, science, politics, civil society, very importantly, and that of every country in the world. We need to all work hand in hand. Basically, everything that our civilization has to offer has to work hand in hand for us to be able to collectively address this challenge, because our very civilization is at risk. And I think now the public perception is moving in this direction. More and more people acknowledge that this is what needs to be done. So, because through my, by educating myself, I started to understand the magnitude of the challenge. I asked myself what I can do to contribute to the solution, because I believe every one of us has a responsibility. The more education, the more influence, the more power you have, the more you have a responsibility to do your personal part to contribute to the solution. So I'm an international prosecutor, and I ask myself, what can the judicial branch of government and law enforcement do to contribute to it? And are they in fact playing a sufficient role already to contribute to solving this challenge? So back in 2015, I convinced the president of the ICC, of the court, to send me to Paris to participate in the climate talks at the COP21 as a representative of the ICC. My aim was to speak to policymakers, to scientists, to civil society, to understand whether there is a vision to strategically support and use the judiciary to play its dual role in fighting climate change. And my conclusion was there wasn't. And so when I came back from Paris, that is when I've decided, okay, I need to use my perspective, my role and my knowledge to change that. So let me go back a step. Why do I think that courts do play a role in this? A significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions and environmental destruction is either directly illegal or it is indirectly linked to illegal activities. A core example of this is deforestation, especially in tropical regions. Of course, I'm not going to say all of emissions are illegal, but a significant part are. In fact, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 12 to 15% of the global greenhouse gas emissions result from deforestation. And this is quite a significant part. Also, what is true is that in many of these regions, a very high percentage of the emissions, the deforestation is linked to illegal activities. In Brazil, MAP Biomas, that is a Brazilian civil society organization of experts, has estimated through remote sensing technology that up to 95% of the current deforestation in Brazil is illegal. So you see the relevance, of these laws. And also, what needs to be said is forest destruction not only emits carbon emissions, but it also destroys one of the world's most efficient carbon sinks. So by enforcing the laws that are violated, by enforcing these laws, the judiciary can play a very important role in contributing to addressing the climate emergency. What also is, we always think it's the politicians that do it. The politicians play their role, but it is only one aspect. A big benefit of the judges in a democratic society as ours, judges are impartial and independent. Their decision-making is not subject to short-term political gains or special interest lobbying, as politicians are. Yet the decisions are legally binding and must be enforced. And this is, to highlight that again, the judicial branch of government plays an immensely important role in this fight, but it is currently underused. And this is where I went further in my quest to say, what are the reasons? Why are the laws that are there to protect the forest, to protect forest people, to protect the environment, under-enforced? Why is there a law enforcement gap? And there I've identified several reasons. And I've looked at it very much from the perspective of a prosecutor, because that is what I am. I spoke to many colleagues, international prosecutors, domestic prosecutors, prosecutors specialized in environmental crimes. And it emerges, there is a very clear pattern that emerges. These laws are under-enforced because the prosecutor has the powers to enforce the law, do not have a sufficient quantity and quality of information accessible to them. Prosecutors always need to make hard decisions. They need to decide which cases they prioritize over other cases. So they will obviously prioritize those cases where they have the evidence easily available to them to prosecute. And for the specific crimes or other illegalities that we are talking here, there is a gap. Judges, prosecutors simply don't have it. And therefore, these cases are deprioritized. Also, there is insufficient coordination among law enforcement agencies, domestically, but also internationally, to address those aspects that contribute to climate change. We see this international and domestic coordination in other areas, for example, in fighting terrorism, organized crime, tax evasion, other financial crimes, but we don't have it in the environmental area or those specifically relevant to climate change. Now, investigative NGOs, as it stands, or as it was in the past, they were not able to fill this gap. They often investigate, produce some information, and give it to law enforcement with a request to investigate and prosecute. And I'm always at the receiving end of this. I see how NGOs try to trigger enforcement, but the biggest problem is that the quantity and quality of the information that we receive is simply not good enough. But there is now a possibility to change it. And this brings me now to the core of the topic of today's discussion. So technological and social developments provide civil society with the tools and the powers to play a role in supporting law enforcement in a way that they can use their power in a much more coordinated and systematic way to enforce the law relevant to climate change and environmental destruction. As you know, today, everyone lives with the internet. Over 4 billion people use the internet. This transforms every one of us from passive recipients information to active participants into a global interconnected community. We can share information and ideas. We can generate information. We can not only consume it, but generate. We can preserve information. We can generate technical opinions, analyze information, for instance, by geolocating images. And also people and organizations are more connected than ever. A single NGO will not have the ability to provide a response that can meaningfully assist the law enforcement, especially when we talk about transnational law enforcement to take action. But collectively we can. Our coordinated action will put us in a position where we can join forces, join ideas, and join our means and ability to have a strategic impact. Everyone basically who is willing, every individual, every private individual who is willing can use their ideas, talent, and time to contribute to a project that they support. Today, there are citizen investigation platforms such as Bellingcat, or Amnesty International has an investigation platform that uses the collective power of the global interconnected citizens to contribute to investigations. And in fact, more and more civil society organizations, scientific organizations, educational institutions, individual professionals, even private corporations are increasingly using their powers and their tools to cooperate, to share information, and to contribute to a common goal. Now, this also, from an investigative perspective, provides us with new types of information and evidence. In the past, people were communicating orally, or they were writing down in paper. Now, most of the communication is done electronically. It is shared and multiplied in social media, email, and other platforms. From an investigative perspective, this is a goldmine. Criminals also use these tools, and their communication now can be retrieved, can be preserved, and used as evidence. There is technical evidence that is available that was unthinkable some years ago, remote sensing evidence, financial and commercial information that is digitized. There are new analysis tools that are available, for instance, analysis tools that allow us to use big data to make a picture that is relevant for establishing a case, for investigating. So these tools collectively give civil society an enormous power to contribute to law enforcement, potentially even stronger than some traditional law enforcement powers are. Of course, as civil society organizations, we don't have executive powers. We cannot subpoena witnesses to testify. We cannot raid an office of a company and take all their computers. But collectively, we have more resources than law enforcement has, financial and human. We have more expertise, scientific, technological. We have legal expertise. Very importantly, local organizations have the situation-specific knowledge and expertise that law enforcement doesn't have. And also, we have more direct and timely access to information for an investigation. Official investigations are always done ex post facto. Whereas we as first responders, we are there earlier, sometimes even at the time when the events unfold. And this gives us an enormous power. And based on this, I developed a concept to establish an organization that has now developed into the Center for Climate Crime Analysis, CCCA. And the idea is to make use of this enormous potential. So CCCA is a non-profit organization of prosecutors and law enforcement experts. We intend to trigger and support worldwide legal action against climate change. What we want to do is to bridge the gap between the many organizations and individuals and civil society that have access to relevant information and expertise on the one hand, and law enforcement on the other hand. So we use our law enforcement expertise to work together with civil society organizations, with expert organizations, with individuals who want to lend their expertise to assist them in and to coordinate their activities so they can preserve, generate, and analyze information that can effectively be used as evidence in court. We then gather this information, we analyze it, and build concrete case files applying the law, and we make those case files then available to the relevant law enforcement authorities. And if necessary, we provide ongoing support to those authorities to investigate and prosecute the case. We also give our case files to advocacy organizations, civil society organizations that advocate either in court or outside the court. And we also give it to private corporations to assist them in complying with their due diligence obligations or their voluntary sustainability standards. So in this sense, CCCA, we intend to be a force multiplier. And that is both for civil society organizations and for law enforcement. A force multiplier for civil society organizations in that through our legal expertise, we assist them in their collection and analysis of information and ensure that their collective work reaches, first of all, the threshold of evidence that is admissible in court, and it also reaches those institutions that have the power to enforce the law. We are a force multiplier for law enforcement authorities because we provide them with information and analysis that would otherwise not be available to them, or it would only be available to them at a very high cost. So we empower and enable them to use their institutional power to contribute to the fight against climate change. I have a few minutes left, and I would like to use this to talk about a few case studies, how we are doing this in practice. And because our audience is mostly Brazilian, I would like to talk how CCCA works in Brazil together with its partners, its civil society partners, to trigger and support domestic and foreign law enforcement against the drivers of illegal deforestation and human rights violations in Brazil. So, as mentioned before, about 95% of deforestation in Brazil is either illegal, outright illegal, or it is indirectly linked to illegal activities. So that is because, for instance, deforestation takes place without lawful permits, or it is carried out in indigenous or protected land where, as a matter of law, it is not allowed and therefore illegal. It is also very often directly linked to human rights violations, especially the violations of the rights of indigenous or other traditional people. We also see that the beef sector, that is one of the main drivers of deforestation in Brazil, is contaminated by forced labor. These are just a few examples, but it gives an idea that there are concrete, possibilities of using existing law, enforcing existing law through our authorities to tackle the phenomena of illegal deforestation in Brazil. So CCCA, we focus on the main drivers of deforestation in the Amazon. These are the economic drivers and the financial drivers. In particular, for the cattle industry and the financial sector. As we have learned that the main reason for deforestation in the Amazon is the conversion of land from forest land into grazing land to get areas for cattle grazing. And we also see that the actors involved are local actors. They are local companies, but also international companies that are, through their supply chains or through their financial institutions, through their portfolios, support this action and therefore the deforestation, either directly or indirectly. So we seek to build cases against corporations and financial institutions who, through their supply chains and portfolio, can impact on the deforestation on the ground. And we seek to trigger and support legal action against those corporations, both in Brazil and abroad. So we use criminal investigation and case building techniques because we are criminal prosecutors. But we use it because criminal law has the highest standards of proof and the most stringent laws on evidence. So we believe that by following these principles, we will then be able to use our case files to support all kinds of legal action in all kinds of jurisdictions. That could be civil, litigation, administrative or regulatory enforcement, or even non-legal advocacy, but based on very strong, credible evidence. So this is our strategy. Our strategy will only work if we find the partners on the ground or internationally to work with. As I said before, CCCA doesn't work in a vacuum. We work with partners, which are the foundation of our principle to work, right? So we have 5 categories of partners in Brazil, and I will give you just some examples, so for you to see who we work with. So first of all, and this is a core principle, we always work together with affected communities. So in Brazil, we have very good cooperation with affected communities of indigenous people of the Caindé, Rondônia. We also work with COIAP, which Bruno is our expert in this area. COIAP is the Association of Indigenous People in the Amazon. Then we work together with a number of local civil society organizations in Brazil that support our investigations and analysis. They include Amazon, Map Biomas, WWF Brazil, ISA, Instituto Socioambiental, I think it stands for. Then we work together with international NGOs that support our investigations and analysis. They include the American Association for the Advancement of Science, Profundo, which is a Dutch organization specialized in financial investigation. We work with the Open Society Justice Initiative, that is an expert in international corporate investigations. We work with the University of Santa Cruz that supports us in open source investigations. We work with Greenpeace International, Frontline Defenders that are experts in providing security advice to us and to our partners. Then we work with a number of international NGOs that support litigation and advocacy. For instance, Mighty Earth, the Bank Information Center, Client Earth, Climate Advisors. And last but not least, we work together with law enforcement partners. We have a very strong MOU with Europol, which is the European Law Enforcement Coordination Agency, with the European Environmental Crimes Network. We started cooperation with Interpol, which is the world's law enforcement coordination agency. We have support from the Office of the Prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, where I work. And we work together with national law enforcement agencies. They include the Federal Prosecution Service in Brazil, the MPF, but also state prosecutors in the various Brazilian states where we focus on. And we work together with the Dutch police as well. So these are just some examples that that we work with in the Brazil cases. Now, let me just to illustrate what we do in practice. Let me just talk about 2 types of cases that we have concluded or significantly advanced. I can talk about these cases because they're the public domain. There is a lot of work that we are doing where, in the interest of protecting the investigation, it's premature to talk publicly about. But there are a few cases that I can talk about. The first category concerns multiple cases that against Brazilian slaughterhouses driving illegal deforestation. As I said before, deforestation in the Amazon is primarily driven by cattle grazing and the conversion of land. So we have developed an investigative methodology whereby we are able to identify where slaughterhouses source their cattle from and to what extent they source their cattle from land that has been illegally deforested, land that is under embargo, from protected areas, or even from an indigenous area, because all of that will be illegal. So we have started, we have a very good cooperation agreement with the federal prosecutors in the Amazon areas, especially in the state of Mato Grosso, in the state of Amazonas, Pará. And they identify for us target corporations. And we do then the investigation for them. We identify, as I say, their supply chain and whether and to what extent they supply cattle from illegally deforested land. So we built a case against a slaughterhouse called Frigorifico Amazonas. And we showed that they have, through their supply chain, caused illegal deforestation in the state of Amazonas. So based on so we built a case file, analyzed it in light of the law applicable in Brazil. In the process, we had several consultations with the MPF prosecutors, for them to tell us what exactly they want and how they want the information to be presented. So we work really hand in hand, and they accept our support because we see that we are, from the field, and we can provide concrete support for them. So the MPF, as a result of our information, filed a civil action against the slaughterhouse that included a fine of 43 million reais. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, so Brazilian money, which is the equivalent of $8.22 million US. As a result of this, Frigorifico signed a TAC, which is a conduct agreement with the MPF, subjecting itself to the monitoring of the MPF and complying or committing, rather, not to buy cattle from illegally deforested land. So this is a big step forward, because what ultimately we seek to achieve is not simply to punish deforestation that has happened, but to deter and prevent future deforestation. And this is what this strategy allows us to do. And the prosecutor, he publicly stated to O Eco, a Brazilian news magazine, that CCCA's support was essential for his action. He said, and I quote, "Our expert analysis sometimes takes years because there is a backlog, a process that needs to be followed." And then he added, "The analysis made by CCCA was delivered in 40 days. And this is what I mean when I say that we as civil society organizations, collectively, we have the power to do something that law enforcement authorities cannot do. They have the power to enforce the law, which we don't have. We have the power to collect and analyze information to enable them to do it. So we have made similar cases against another slaughterhouse called Frigorifico Alvorada in Mato Grosso, where there, I think the fine imposed was over $50 million. And now we're in the process of completing cases against 11 more such slaughterhouses. So you see, we are really taking a systemic approach to make sure that the supply chains of the slaughterhouses, of the main drivers of illegal deforestation, is cleaned up. And therefore, we want to stop the economic incentive for illegal deforestation. Let me just take 2 more minutes to talk about another case, because I think that shows that we are acting globally. The problem of deforestation, if driven by commodities like beef, the problem is an international one, because to some extent beef is exported, but there's also international actors involved in Brazil and abroad that have an impact on the economic system that drives deforestation. And so together with our partners, we have built a case against a French supermarket chain called Casino. Casino is Latin America's largest food retail company. And we have provided evidence and analysis to support litigation in France, where Casino is based, the headquarters of France, under a new due diligence law. and we impute on Casino the responsibility for deforestation and human rights violations. So this is the very first case of its kind. And among the plaintiffs in this case are indigenous organizations from Brazil and from Colombia. So through our investigations, we have established that Casino regularly bought beef from 3 slaughterhouses owned by JBS. JBS is the world's largest meat packing company. That is very obvious and very probably the key player in Brazil. So we have shown through probative evidence that these slaughterhouses sourced cattle from at least 592 suppliers, that collectively they are responsible for at least 50,000 hectares of deforestation between 2008 and 2020. So you see, the action that the investigation that we are taking in Brazil is also used to support international or transnational enforcement activities. In this case, it is in France. And we are currently, and this is under the coordination of Bruno, we are preparing expert evidence identifying and quantifying the material and moral damage suffered by the indigenous groups as a result of the deforestation that can be attributed to Casino. So the evidence will then be presented by COIA and used as a basis for a claim of compensation in the proceedings in France and for the benefit of the indigenous groups in Brazil. So you see, this is shows how, starting from the work of our civil society partners on the grounds, we can support collectively. This is a collective effort. We can collectively support law enforcement in Brazil and internationally. And hopefully then, soon we will see a dip in the deforestation because we are targeting the economic drivers. Ultimately, the whole deforestation is driven by economic interests. So we need to target the drivers, and that is what we're seeking to do through legal action worldwide. So that is what we are doing. Back to you, Bruno.
Thank you very much, Reinhold. Your lecture was not only precise, all Brazilians in the CCCA Brazil team, and they are trying to develop we're arriving at the first results of our work right now. I see that the audience is posing some questions. I'll spare some time at the end of our meeting to address them, but I would also like to take the opportunity to thank Julia, who is a graduate student from Pontifícia Universidade Católica do Paraná, without who helped us on circulating the press release for the event, without who we wouldn't be able to reach all the audience that we're reaching right now. Also, I would like to thanks that you mentioned the CCCA team that is on the audience, also giving support and helping me to organize this chat. Please, I'll pass this on to Maria Nusdeo. Your Reinhold's lecture got me thinking about the impact of such of this work on the Brazilian legal system for the protection of the environment, and especially on climate action under the Brazilian law. Hopefully, Professor, you would have something to comment on this, and we're willing to hear your thoughts. Please, you have the floor.
Good morning. I think it's my time, right, Bruno? It's my turn. So good morning for everyone. I would like to start thanking Professor Samuel Barbosa and Mecila for this kind invitation. I'd like also to congratulate Dr. Reinhold Gallmetzer, for the lecture, as well as congratulate him for the CCCA initiative, and especially for this big and substantial effort he's putting to create answers for these contemporary challenges we have. That's where climate change takes a very important place. So as Gallmetzer put it, climate change is one of the significant problems, perhaps one of the most important problems of our time. And I was very impressed by the way he told how he came up with the idea of the CCCA, and in the sense what asking himself what could he do. And I do that myself, and I do that with my students because sometimes they get really depressed about the environmental situation, about the country situation, and I try to push them to ask themselves just kind of questions. So, what can we do, and how can we coordinate ourselves, and in order to to face this challenge? So congratulations, and I admire that very much. And my comments, you focus basically on two issues. First, I will talk a little bit about the crimes that are being perpetrated in the Brazilian Amazon nowadays. And secondly, I will try to place Dr. Gallmetzer proposals in the current debate on climate governance and on climate litigation. With regards to the crimes that are now being committed in the Amazon, it's important, I think if the audience is Brazilian, probably they know very well that deforestation rates increased substantially in the last 2 years, which means 2019 and 2020. Deforestation rates in those years were actually twice the rates of 2011, when Bruno was my student. And an important background is that from 2004 on, an important program for the prevention and combating of deforestation in the Amazon, which is the PPC then, was implemented, and it was based on enforcement. So I think that's a good dialogue with Gallmetzer's concerns. And it was fairly effective, where we can say very effective, although it failed in the sense of not creating sustainable alternatives for the economy in the Amazon. So that's another question, but was very successful in the reduction of deforestation rates. But it lost its priority after 2012, and rates started increasing again. But of course, those rates scaled up in 2019 and 2020 due to the options and perspectives of the new government. And so deforestation is itself a crime, but it induces the commitment of other crimes. And another background that's important is that environmental crimes in Brazil are defined in a specific statute, that's the Environmental Criminal Act. That was a statute enacted in 1998. So deforestation, timber logging, illegal timber trade, and forest burning, as well as poaching, are all environmental crimes according to this statute. However, the environmental crimes penalties are low and very seldom results in imprisonment. So that's a kind of a handicap of this statute. But on the other hand, as Gallmetzer puts very well, this criminality, it's not only a scattered criminality, but it requires a substantial and sophisticated structure, a sophisticated criminal and financing structure that's linked to criminal chains, in addition to be financed for these economic incentives, as Gallmetzer puts it. So environmental crimes, especially in Amazon, are often intertwined with other crimes such as land grabbing and corruption, fraud, as well as murders. And then it should be noted that sadly, Brazil is one of the countries with the highest rates of environmentalist leader murders, which includes also indigenous leaders. So that's a violence, a strong violence that's also related to those environmental crimes. That means that the operational structure that coordinates action of the federal police and other fiscalization and intelligence agencies is very important. And there is also a need to deepen the actions in relation to money laundering and illegal arms dealing, where information is really essential, and that goes to the CCCA initiative. And so information is a very important piece to organize an answer for this criminality. And also there's some reliable information that organized criminal groups such as PCC, which is a criminal group that was originated in Brazilian prisons, are now acting in the Amazon. So that changed the prospect, and that even turns the situation even worse and more dangerous, and requires a very organized effort to be to solve this problem, or at least to address this problem. So as a conclusion of this first issue of my comments, I think that there is indeed an urgency to organize fiscalization and prosecution, considering the action of organized crime. Of course, this approach the CCCA is taken in Brazil, that's trying to address the economic incentives, is very important, because it really, without these economic incentives, probably the crime will lose its interest. But there is also a space for just kind of criminal prosecution and criminal cooperation that I understand Dr. Gallmetzer ideas support very strongly. And it's interesting also to comment that, and I was glad to know that the CCCA is working with public prosecutors, because now, as probably, well, you, the audience, and probably Gallmetzer knows, we have a national attorney general that's very omissive and very close to the president's lack of interest to prosecute those crimes and go deeper into the connections between the criminals and the groups behind. And certainly the groups behind are groups that nowadays are well represented in the legislative and executive branches. So, but on the other hand, we have these independent public prosecutors that has been very active in the last decade, since the enactment of the Constitution in 1988. So the Ministério Público has a strong tradition of prosecuting and being not only prosecuting because they are legally competent for that, but they have this tradition of an active search of an environmental policy. So that's a very important, I think it's a very important door for these initiatives, such as the CCCA, and for these projects to come to Brazil. And then I will move now to the second issue of my comments, which relates to climate governance and climate litigation, because I understand all this discussion now, the discussion and the proposals of Gallmetzer and the CCCA can be located at the confluence of two current discussions. As I mentioned, a discussion, literature discussion about the climate governance and the phenomenon and the process that we are seeing now of the climate litigation. So when the literature discusses climate governance, it proposes that climate governance is essentially multi-level or multi-scale. And that's not only due to the interaction of international and national rules, let's say international treaties and national rules to adapt to obligations undertaken under those international treaties, but also because of the action of other regimes and the action of other actors. So Kyohane and Victor, for instance, worked with the concept of regime complex, where they describe a bunch of other regimes that can be bilateral, multilateral, that can be general or specialized, and address climate change issues or climate change concerned issues such as energy and low carbon production and so on. But other scholars such as Kenneth Abbott even expands the scope of analysis of the climate governance to the work or to the role of state and non-state actors that creates different sort of norms and standards that operate not only on just at the international or national level, but also transnationally, and some of them being mandatory, for instance, states and local rules, but also a great deal of voluntary norms that are created by private institutions. So that creates a very complex and very heterogeneous set of governance. That's a process that's been very much in the interest of those that studies climate change regulation. And climate litigation, on the other hand, can be seen as a process that become very significant in recent years, that can also be considered as an element of this multi-scale governance. So when NGOs or citizen organizations field actions against governments or against business or financial institutions, they somehow take part on this governance, trying to create, by the use of the judiciary powers, new rules that will, at the end of the day, will increase the ambitions of governmental policies or define responsibility by the business in general. And so climate litigation is indeed a really impressive phenomenon. The Grantham Research Institute of the London School of Economics keeps a database when they collect the actions fields that are related to climate change, which composes the set of the climate litigation. And there were 1,841 actions concluded, or cases, ongoing or concluded cases of climate litigation as of May 2021. They were filled mainly by NGOs and citizen organizations, as I mentioned, and they are being responsible for the development of important doctrinal arguments that related to human rights, separation of powers, and legal responsibility, among others. So, of course, their success requires accurate information and evidence on causes, consequences, and impacts of climate change. And for this reason, the IPCC reports are often quoted and present on the basis of court decisions. So I think the idea of canalization of information produced by society, by civil society or educational institutions, as Gallmetzer presents it, can be really helpful to increase the level of evidence of this climate litigation that's being undertaken by the civil society or REDS. And so I think that's, as I said at the beginning, I think that's, of course, the center is an experience, is a new initiative that but tries to really to answer to the challenge we have nowadays. And I'm very willing to know which are the questions of the audience. And of course, there are many challenges, especially on this idea of production and keeping of information. And I'd like to propose a first another question. I know that there are many questions for the audience, but perhaps to listen Dr. Gallmetzer about how does he see the problem of cyber attacks, or even the production or fake news to decharacterize the information that may be created by this, let's say, this civil society broad process of information production. So thanks again for the invitation and for the opportunity to get to know the interesting ideas of Dr. Gallmetzer and the important problem you all are the important initiative you created with the CCCA. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Ana Maria Nusdeo. These were very interesting comments and indeed a very interesting question. I'll let Reinhold reply to that. Maybe you can take maybe a few minutes, Reinhold. We have a couple of questions of the audience, and after your reply, maybe you can listen to what they want to hear. But please, Reinhold, go ahead.
Thank you, Bruno, and thank you, Ana Maria, for the very constructive thoughts. I've made a lot of notes while you spoke. Let me just respond to two specific points that you made. You were in your first segment, you were analyzing different criminal phenomena and criminal statutes that can be applied. And yes, you're absolutely right that criminal law enforcement is very challenging because, as I said before, it applies evidentiary thresholds that are extremely high. There is a presumption of innocence. The burden is on the prosecution to prove the guilt beyond reasonable doubt, and any doubt will be weighed in favor of an accused. So it is, in short, extremely difficult to successfully prosecute individuals. And then on top of it, as you said, in environmental law enforcement, they're often very low sentences. So the question is, what is really the impact of criminal, law enforcement if we make a cost-benefit analysis? And we have thought about this very carefully in CCCA. And our conclusion was that actually criminal law enforcement is not our primary objective. We use means of criminal investigation and criminal case building, but we can be much more successful in winning cases and in having impact with successful cases when we pursue other legal fora, and that is specifically regulatory and administrative enforcement, civil litigation, or sometimes even work together with private actors, corporations, to assist them in complying with their due diligence obligations, or in assisting them in complying with their voluntary obligations. Let me make an example. We have done extensive investigation in Peru. We have investigated pollution and environmental harm caused by a mine in Peru. So we have two choices to make. We can pursue a criminal investigation that might target an individual, and that would be very, very difficult. And even if we win, well, a person goes to jail, but who does that help in concrete terms, right? Individuals are corporate individuals. They are fungible, if you want, and it has little impact. So we pursued a different strategy. So what we did is, with our investigation, we approached the shareholder, the main shareholder of the mother company of the corporation. The mine is owned by an Anglo-Swiss corporation called Glencore, that is one of the world's largest mining companies, and it is actually one of the world's largest thermal coal producers, which is the reason why it's relevant for climate change and why it was relevant for us. So we convinced the main shareholders of the company that their investment in that corporation, based on the evidence that we produced, was violating their own principle of ethical investment. And through after a lengthy process and what I think as a result of a very strong evidentiary file, we caused that investor to divest more than $1 billion from the company, which I think in the end has much more of an impact than throwing one person to jail. In the end, it's the problem of climate change. There is the economic interest there behind it. So if we don't tackle the root cause and instead focus on the symptoms, we don't address the problem successfully. And this is why we are, on the one hand, criminal methodologies, but we use non-criminal outputs. On your other attack, your other question, cyber attacks. Yes, this is obviously something to be very careful, because people, we don't want to put anyone at risk as a result of their work that they're doing on the ground. It's people who are on the ground who do their work, first responders, indigenous organizations, local NGOs. They work in an environment where working together with law enforcement, either directly or through us, can expose them to risk. So this is something that we really take as a high priority to ensure that their cooperation with us does not expose them to risks. We use safe methods of communication, safe methods of information sharing, and also in our litigation, we will never expose anyone. We will make sure that their interests are protected first and foremost. Of course, in doing this, again, we use technology. We use technology to communicate, share information securely. The criminals do it too. We just need to be, at least at the same level as the criminals. But we have the tools available, but it is something that needs to be taken very serious. And this is one service or support that we can provide to our local partners. In my day work, we work in crisis areas, post-war conflict areas, where again the security is a massive concern, security to victims, to witnesses, and therefore we learn to work by protecting the people who work with us and who provide us with information. And we are using this expertise also for the benefit of our partners in our efforts with CCCA.
Thank you, Reinhold. We had a little bit of unstable connection, but I'm back. I guess I heard pretty much of what we're saying. I would like to we still have some minutes. I would like to pass on to some of the questions of the audience. One question was maybe addressed to both of you, even Professor Maria Nusdeo. Someone asked about what lawyers and civil society organizations are engaged on this, and I'm sorry, I need to take my video off. My connection is unstable. I think you hear me better if I take the video off. So I was saying that law enforcement agencies and also even the public prosecutors' offices here in Brazil are addressing climate change on their petitions and the legal actions. So I would like to hear maybe from both of you, and what are your thoughts on the future of climate litigation? Please, Reinhold, if you could start.
So when we talk about climate litigation, right, I think we need to look at it from a very broad, big lens, right? We don't look at laws that have the word climate in it. We also can't wait until someone creates new laws. There are efforts to do that, ecocide or so, but we don't have the time to do that. We need to use the law as it is today and enforce it with the authorities that we have today. And therefore, we need to work together with law enforcement, with the MPF, with state prosecutors, to take meaningful action to address the phenomenon that contributes to climate change. What I think, well, and I think I'm deeply impressed by the quality, commitment, and courage of the Brazilian prosecutors that we are working with. It's really a sample, an example of very efficient, independent, powerful law enforcement, and therefore they have an opportunity and a power to make a meaningful contribution. They're doing it now by enforcing the forest codes, that Ana Maria spoke to, by targeting cattle. But I think what we need to do increasingly more, both domestically and international, is to target the financial sector, to see how are banks contributing, how are banks financing the corporations that drive deforestation. Because it cannot be that banks are lawfully investing in a conduct that results in illegal activity. And I think banks are really if we manage to cut off the financial support of these drivers of deforestation by focusing on banks, this is really where we can have, through a few strategic and targeted cases, a massive impact. And that is not only Brazil. It's banks in Brazil, but also financial institutions, insurers abroad. We need to see how is the international financial market and sector is contributing to this phenomena locally. Of course, now we're talking specific about deforestation in Brazil. Other situations will have different responses. But what I'm saying is we need to be flexible and very creative how we use the body of law as a whole to meaningfully impact on the causes that, for greenhouse gas emission that contribute to climate change. There is not one response. Every situation will need its own sophisticated thinking and case strategy to respond to it through litigation.
Thank you, Reinhold. Maybe if you have something to comment, Professor Ana Maria.
Yes, I will take the idea of Gallmetzer related to this idea that climate to understand climate change as a very broad phenomenon, a very broad strategy that addresses not only specific climate law violations, but also practices that contributes to climate change. And some people that are studying the climate litigation process report that in the South, in the countries of the South, of the global South, the climate litigation is very linked to the subject of forests, even to the laws of nature discussion. So I understand climate change nowadays become a kind of I don't know if I will express it properly in English, but an agglutination, an idea of an agglutination idea, an agglutination possibility to improve environmental law and to expand its frontiers. And we have other serious problems, such as the reduction of biodiversity, for instance, but perhaps climate change as a very broad phenomenon that create impacts that are very sensitive to people, to human rights, but that's linked with a lot of economic interests on the other hand. It has this kind of broadness that allows this strategy to move forward in different directions. And so that's what I think on this sense. I think the prospects are of a continuing development that will allow us not only to, and I hope to have good results, especially with strategies that goes directly to the economic incentives, because climate change really has to do with reorganization of the economies in order that they really turn low carbon economies, but also will help us to develop legal doctrines, and that's why I see it as a potential for the improvements of the environmental law itself.
Professor Nusdeo, these were very great indeed. We have a few minutes left, and I have one more question. It's a more specific question, so it goes to Reinhold. Reinhold, what are the specificities of the CCCA's work, and what type of challenges is the most common challenge that we face when we're building the cases and building an argument for the cases that we're building? What are your opinion on this?
Well, every case is different. So what we have to do in whatever activities we pursue is to generate, together with our partners, a body of high quality probative evidence. And that is, the single biggest challenge. We start off by developing a strategy and then a case hypothesis. Once we have a case hypothesis that says us, okay, what do we want to achieve? We need, and what type of evidence do we need for that strategy? We need an investigation plan. The investigation plan tells us how do we obtain the evidence that we need to pursue our strategy. And here is where our partners come in. We are building a network of organizations that we believe either have the information already, or they have access to that information, or they have the expertise to generate it. So that is actually really the most important, it's the foundation of our case building, to find the network of partners, to mobilize them, to create a common goal, and to coordinate our activities to collectively, jointly build a case that can sustain. Now, we have been, and it came a bit of a surprise to me how relatively easy it was to mobilize people, because what I realized, and before trying it out, you don't know how much goodwill there is, how much commitment, and how open doors, how wide open the doors were in Brazil for us to come in with all humility and all due respect for the expertise and the knowledge of others, but to contribute our part and to build these joint platforms for each case to make them strong enough to be pursued. Now, one big challenge is, other than traditional law enforcement organizations, we do not rely on testimonial witness evidence. And that is for several reasons. First of all, testimonial evidence collected by NGOs, as we are. I mean, of course, I am a prosecutor, but in the capacity of CCCA, I'm not. And judges do not like to give weight to testimonial evidence collected by NGOs. That is the first. The second one, if not done properly, it exposes people at risk. And risk avoidance is one of our core principles of our work. And we do not want to expose any of our interlocutors to that risk. Thirdly, collecting testimonial evidence is also very, very time consuming and expensive. Whereas we think through modern technologies, we can get access to higher quality evidence, we can do it faster, and it is less costly. So the way we investigate is really very innovative, and conventional law enforcement often doesn't work like that. So the challenge then is to convince law enforcement to rely on evidentiary tools that they haven't worked with before. Convince them that they are as probative, if not more probative, than the type of evidence that they have produced before. But again, our experience with the Brazilian prosecutors is extremely positive. So we are mastering the challenges as they come along. We need the flexibility, the humility, and the dedication to our work to do step by step. Also have obviously the foresight and the planning that goes into it. But we still have a long way to go, but I think with the partners that we are working with, I'm very optimistic that we can achieve great results.
Thank you once more, Reinhold. I think we're reaching our time. This will be the time for us doing our final words. I'd like to have the opportunity once more to thank you all that were involved in organizing this meeting, especially the staff from Mecila, Melanie, and Rafael that are here with us today. Without you, we certainly wouldn't be able to have this interesting chat. And I'll open the floor for if you, Reinhold, or if you, Professor Ana Maria Nusdeo, if you want to make a final comments, or just to say goodbye to us all. And thank you all for following us up to until now. Please, Reinhold, maybe you can go ahead.
Okay, I thank you and Mecila's organization again for giving me this opportunity to participate, to talk about the work that we are doing. And I would like to address all people from the audience. As I said during my presentation, we all need to do our part in contributing, to addressing this challenge. If you would like to contribute to the work that CCCA does, if you have ideas, if you have some expertise, or if you simply want to know more, please reach out to me, to Bruno, to other people from the organization. We have a website. You will find our contact information there, or you write to me directly. I'll be very happy to engage with you further. Thank you.
And yeah, thanks again for the invitation. And it was really I was very happy to get to know the work of the CCEA and to get to know Reinhold Gallmetzer and to meet Bruno and Samuel again. And my final comment would be the one thing that I think it's very interesting in the environmental law is how doctrine and practice and interconnects well together. And because environmental law is a kind of human rights implementation, that's you not only discuss it, but you need to have your hands on and help things to happen. So I think that's the debate of today had a lot to do with this perspective for the environmental law. So congratulations and thanks.
Well, thank you once more for being here and taking the time to talk to us. Thank you, Reinhold. I know your schedule is busy, but this was a very nice talk, and hopefully the Brazilian audience and even the audience from other countries would enjoy the opportunity to know more about the good work that CCCA is conducting here. And thank you, Professor Ana Maria, for also taking the time to be here with us. I'll thank again Samuel Barbosa, who is a professor at the University of São Paulo, was the one that intermediated our connections with Mecila and helped us host this event. He's on the background today, but it's not always this way. So thank you, Melanie, for assisting us with hosting the streaming, and thank you for the audience to follow us up until now. And as Reinhold was saying, CCCA has a website. We have our contacts there, and if you want to know more about the organization's work, please feel free to contact there. There were some questions that we wouldn't be able to respond here. There are some specific issues on those questions that we'll be happy to answer through email or other types of contacts. Once more, I would also like to note to thank the participation of the Pontifícia Universidade Católica do Paraná Human Rights Clinic that helped us organize the event, in the person of Judy Stefanello, who's also in the audience, and everybody that was with us today. Well, thank you, and I think this